internet is on. It's on my city Wi-Fi, so I don't know how long it'll hold for. So and I've got the engineer coming out tomorrow to have a look at the BT hub. So just to say hello to the people of the world that choose to tune into my diaries of the evening after whatever midday I may have had. Do you know what I mean? So if Dean was here, I'd probably sit talking to Dean. So I've had a really lovely night. I actually sat chatting with Graham, and I actually find Graham quite interesting. But a couple of things were said tonight, and yeah, it's sort of been a bit bringing a few of all this stuff that some people think is conspiracy and some people think is a bunch of people who don't take responsibility, and people think it's just a blame culture, and what people think is okay, it's going on, but and I don't know, just to have a couple of things just confirmed for me today, that on one end of the spectrum, thinking, oh, paranoia and complete and utter conspiracy, and you know, these are really crazy thoughts, to actually having the confirmation that what we're standing up for deeper down the rabbit hole is actually like true. And I think to sit and have these conversations with someone, and I do go through these moments when I have conversations with Graham over, you know, is Graham fucking grandeur? Has he got mental health? Is this real and stuff? But as I've been going through all of his stuff with him and going through his paperwork and newspaper clippings and family photographs and piece by piece by piece putting more of the story together, I find it really difficult, because when someone talks to me, if I wasn't taking notes and writing down names and things like that, I don't remember that types of the details. What I remember is the feeling or the emotion or the memory that somebody's had as they're talking, and I can imagine the environment they're sort of in. But when he drops names and says things and stuff like that, unless it's like, are we talking about who I think we're talking about? Like, we're actually having conversations about people within some of the things that we're all going, like, take Band-Aid for a start. You know, my next stage from Pete Parsons is he's getting the person who did Band-Aid involved. And it's like, and then today, rather than sort of going, oh, that's really cool, I went, wasn't all that a complete and utter scam? And Graham sort of like, you know, and then we're having a conversation about Graham's the will of his dad and that, and we were talking about Boris Johnson, and he just sort of says, Kelly, he says, Boris Johnson, he means well, he's a bit of a plump, but he means well. And obviously talking about, you know, because obviously what you got to remember with Graham is Graham like grew up with this network of people that we're talking about. Like, Graham's father was one of the teachers at the school at the time that Boris Johnson was a pupil, and Graham was at school with them and stuff. So, like, to see it from a perspective, like, and also, even though he was like one of the, like, majority of his work, because he was independent, majority of his work was with the BBC for the snooker. Like, the way he sort of talks about Steve Davis and things like that. And obviously, I'm not one of these people that's like this celebrity glory person. I've sort of grown up with it being not like red carpet normality, but normality in seeing, you know, my friend getting up, going to work and taking the kids down to ITV studio with her while she did the filming on, you know, like Bernard's Watch and a couple of other things and stuff like that, and Tracy Beaker and all that sort of stuff. So my kids growing up and going to that sort of stuff was quite normal. And obviously, like, my ex-stepfather, my second ex-stepfather, he was an importer and exporter of cars. So in fact, actually, he would know pretty much everything going on with Brexit. If I could just have a conversation with him, that'd be amazing. But yeah, who was it? Brian Adams. He used to have his cars designed, his Jeeps designed and stuff like that. So, you know, going to concerts in VIP and stuff was always quite normal for me after a certain point in my life. And so I don't sort of have this like, wow, you know, we're talking about this person. We're just having these conversations. But as I'm building a picture within how mine and Graham's networks are crossing over with all of this, I thought Graham was talking about somebody else. And I thought he was talking about Prince Andrew. And I was referring to him, he went, no, he said, no, his father. And he went, well, he had to learn from somebody, didn't he? And listening to it in such a way where, like, you know, obviously Graham has spent like many of his like years of his life completely coked out of his head and drunk, and pretty much so of these people. It's a normality. It's quite normal in their world to celebrate, per se, and to have the bottles of champagne. And like, it's really funny, like he calls the lefty champagne the drinkers, and the way he talks, like, it's quite funny because to listen to all of the different lingo that goes on within politics. Now, Graham won't talk about politics with me. We only tease. I mention Boris Johnson because obviously he wants me to sit down and talk to him properly and explain everything to him properly. And he doesn't want me to hate the man. And he tries to get me to just sort of go, look, like, you know, but on the other side of it, he's talking more about like people who were in the background, so like the producers, the directors. So even though you would see the artists, the music artists, or the any sort of celebrity, so the celebrities that you see, it's the people behind them that he's been talking about. And it's like, he keeps going on about Tony Knowles to me, like everything's going to be all right as soon as you sit down and you talk to Tony Knowles. And as soon as Tony Knowles on board, that it's all going to be okay, Kelly. You know, I don't think we've all been understanding the severity of what you've been going through and the urgency and blah, 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 blah. But like, you know, but when he's talking about like some of the people who's it that sung The Only Way Is Up, Yaz. So we were talking about the person who was behind Yaz today, who then was behind somebody else. And so some of the stuff that Graham says to me is on the record. Some of the stuff that Graham says to me is off the record. Some of it is being in preparation, because if we actually had all the equipment, I would be filming Graham now from pissed wet through in urine in his tracky bottoms through to every day on his schedule. It always has 7:15 shower, 7:30 dressed, and he skips this bit every day and wakes up in his urine infested clothes. But he's getting soberer and soberer every day. And it's quite interesting because he talks to me about him talking about me to people. And what I didn't realize is apparently people are scared of me. And I said to him, I don't want people to be scared of me. And he said to me today, he said, they misunderstand you. He said, you're not a troublemaker, you're a truth. No, what did he say? He said, you're not trying to find trouble, you're doing something with the truth. I can't remember. He said, make sure you write down what I just said. He said, because you're going to want to know that later. But he just sort of hit it on the nail on the head. And obviously Graham's been here in Portsmouth for like pretty much all of his life. And Portsmouth is sort of the main place that, like, you know, some of the girls from Hollyoaks, you know, come down here, they go for runs with their kids and stuff like that. It's sort of like the Hyde Park of London, do you know what I mean? So in Hyde Park, obviously you'll find Madonna doing yoga with a trainer and all this sort of stuff. And so Portsmouth is sort of like the place where, so like if the snooker's on, it comes down to by the sea. It's always sort of like Bournemouth, or Portsmouth is like the place that's not on the map per se. So like Brighton, Portsmouth, is it Great Yarmouth, places like that tend to be sort of the main seafront places where it all comes. So Graham's been here for many, 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 many years. And I was pissing my sides laughing today when I've been dealing with other Graham for quite a while now, since obviously trying to flip these cars over. And he's over in Ibiza at the moment, which is quite funny because I'm watching Dean struggle to get himself over to do something. A man who's in his own way all the time to a man who just flips over, and he's probably done it 2 or 3 times in the time that Dean's been on this journey. That's how much you can live in resistance. Do you know what I mean? If you're that close to a dream that could potentially be a reality, you can be in resistance to it for a very, very long time. And Dean is that close to Cafe de Mars, you know what I mean? And he just has to, and because he's in resistance to himself, where, you know, they've probably been in and out of fucking Cafe de Mars, all the, you know, in and out and stuff. But when he then said to me tonight, he said, and we were talking about how what's his name? Not Bob Geldof. We were talking about Bob Geldof. What's his name? See, it's not my world. What's his name? Shit. Bon Jovi. Is it Bon Jovi? I think I actually posted it earlier. I think it was Bon Jovi. Bon Jovi? No, not Bon Jovi. The other one. Oh, seriously, we talk about so many from the rock world and stuff like that, because what the house that we've been cleaning out, like, he tells me all of the stories of all of the different sort of events that have gone on in the house and stuff. And it's a bit different when you have sort of sober friends of his that can back up some of these stories, because if I was a social worker or a mental health worker or even a psychiatrist, I'd be sitting there sort of thinking, I can't quite work out if this man is in fantasy land or in his own real reality. And obviously I know somebody who's sectioned because he flew all the way over to fucking New York to propose to Jennifer Anderson. This is like years ago. And he really believed that, like, she was meeting him and everything, to the point that he sort of got detained over in New York and sectioned and then deported back to England. And has pretty much spent most of his time in mental health unit ever since. So I do sort of understand that this stuff exists, and I do actually understand that there is this grandeur per se label that exists. But then I also do understand that this label also exists for people who, per se, certain people don't want them getting out of their pram, per se, like above their station. So not to get above your station. And that's something that's not really liked in the Western world, really. They like to know how the funnel's going to develop, because it's already mapped that way. Do you know what I mean? Boris Johnson was groomed for doing this a very, very long time ago. Everything that we're seeing now was, you know, decided 10, 15, 20 years ago. Do you know what I mean? You know, people in that world have set goals and achieving them goals. Like Graham said to me today, he said, like, Boris Johnson, you know, these things, but he's had to deal with that bloody, what was the name? Theresa May for ages. But I do find it quite funny when you're coming from a point of view, like when he talks about, like, you know, champagne drinking lefties, and you know, people always talk about the left and the right and lefties and stuff like that. But, you know, I don't know. It's like even listening to him and the point of view, which I've talked about before, about watching Jenny with her fag addiction and Graham being in complete denial of being an alcoholic. And no, he hasn't had a drink. Graham has never had a drink, apart from he now understands that it's completely okay. And actually, I actually have a glass here. It's actually got some fruit juice in, but it did actually have a functional red wine in it earlier on. And I find this been really difficult since having social services in my life, because isn't it nice just to sit and have, you know, sort of like a nice glass of red wine. But when you've had social bash through your life, like, you even feel nervous just to have all the Christmas freaking drinks on the side, you know what I mean? Just in case they say you're a raging fucking alcoholic. I had one comment used against me, and I had my stomach pumped when I was 17. And what fucking pisses me off is I'd just come out of hospital from having surgery on my knee. I was on medication. I was working, for fuck's sake, at the hospital. And some soldier dropped a fucking, you know, thing in my drink, and I went, oops, upside the head down the fucking stairs, pissed as a freaking fart, because of the medication that I was on. I told him I wasn't allowed to drink, and he put like a fucking double shot of something in my drink, and I was telling them, oh no, I'm not drinking, I'm on medication. So my stomach pumped, and they like used that against me. And I was like 35. Kelly denies having an alcohol issue. It's like, fuck's sake. So to just do something quite normal and actually sit, especially with an alcoholic, because if social walking and I've got like a raging alcoholic in my house, it's like, oh, Kelly got raging alcoholic. You know, and I find it so difficult to come out of this. In fact, somebody sent me a message earlier on, sort of explaining that, you know, her child had been. I'm still waiting for permission to see whether I can actually use what she said, because the way she described, you know, having her baby taken at birth, coming home with her baby, but then living literally 11, 12 years, you know, constantly with social in and out and stuff. And it was quite heartbreaking to sort of read it. So I'm just waiting to see whether she's going to let me use it. So yeah, but I think what sort of devastated me more today was the actual reality that the reason, not the reason that Graham is in this situation and not being some big time fucking film producer sitting in Hollywood sort of thing, but just from being a couple who were in private rental with disability as a support, hearing how when that DLA cut came in, what they've been through as a result of that, and then seeing that Graham at the door with his tramadol on complete desperation, that he was just facing another suspension, and seeing the genuineness that he is overwhelmed with all of this paperwork. And when you go up into Graham's apartment, Graham's got literally the receipts from the Roberts Centre, the DLA letters and everything, and it just gives him a headache. He just is like doing so, because I can cope with somebody else's paperwork. I can't cope with my paperwork, but I can cope with somebody else's paperwork, because it hasn't got the same emotion attachment to me. Like we dealt with it quite quickly, and watching Graham sitting here being on hold and having to go through the whole story of his life, and now they're wanting to now claim back all of his money, which I'll deal with once the letter comes in. I'll deal with it then. And the fact that since we've got the letters from his previous property, because obviously him and Jenny just had to leave the house with absolutely nothing, and then I think housing then put him into the travel in for a bit. What I did, I actually paid for it myself. And then obviously coming here at the Roberts Centre, and then seeing how they've been treated here at the Roberts Centre, and then the fact that, you know, how Jenny's doing and the life that they've got, to now what's the amount of energy it takes for me to hold the ground here for Graham. Because like Graham thinks it's funny, he tells me like when he drops my name at the Roberts Centre, and he's got these characters that he has, the one that drops their head to the one that's like, oh okay, really, that's fantastic, great, okay, that just ticks another one off our tips, you know, to, you know, so he's really looking forward tomorrow to telling them that, like, you know, we had absolute chaos and this is why the rent hasn't been done and Kelly's done this and we've been doing this. So to him it's like, you know, one in the eye to the system, do you know what I mean? But I just think it's really sad. Like, I just think it's really sad that it doesn't matter whether we're top, middle or bottom, we've all got dysfunctional families. Nobody has a perfect family. Nobody has a perfect life. Nobody has made great decisions the whole way through. And some people like to cover up their dark days and their dark mistakes. And I think this is the big problem that I have with my family, that, you know, everybody just wants to know about the positives. And actually, in relation to that, I've been talking to my coach this week. And that's one of the things we've been talking about obviously the coaching world in comparison to real world, and how people mask the pains that they have. And actually, one of my old mentors has actually just completely ripped the veil off and started talking about mental health. But she hasn't just actually talked about mental health. She's actually allowed for her daughter to take a photograph of her when she's in that nobody enters my zone